Welcome to another episode of Open Up to Listen. We have a special guest. I'm your host, Dom. We have a special guest, Anthony Easter. Also, my brother. I'm very proud of him. He got a bachelor's from UC. Oh, goodness. I'm sorry. Got a bachelor's from UC Davis. Ran track in college. Pretty much got his master's from Boston College, and he's now a licensed therapist, and he's in New York working, and he's thinking about getting his doctors or going another way. But welcome, man.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we're gonna be talking about mental health and the juggling of life is pretty much being real, and also just maintaining your life as well as mental health and a balance.
Yeah.
What would you say is the most frequent question that's asked when it comes to mental health?
Yeah, I think this is a fun question because I think I can approach it from two ways. So on one end, right, most common thing that I think people who aren't in therapy or considering therapy or whatever the case may be, um, do I have depression? Do I have anxiety? Or do I have X, Y, and Z? I get that a lot in my personal life. I get it a lot in my professional roles. And it's an interesting question. I think it's a valuable one or a reasonable one, right? And I think in thinking about if an individual has a mental health condition, right, whether it be depression or anxiety, I think it's important to recognize that sadness doesn't always mean depression. Um, just because you're anxious doesn't mean you have anxiety. Nervous doesn't mean you have anxiety. So that's a short answer of like a question I get a lot. And then I think on the other end, like from people who are like starting therapy or in the therapy process, um, a big question I get, and that really comes up in every new session I have with a new client is what is the therapy process like? Like what are we going to be doing in therapy? Um, and I think that's like a really valuable question, right? Especially entering into an arena that folks might not have entered into. I think wanting to know what you're getting into is extremely important, right? There's many times where I want to know what it is that I'm getting into before I just jump into it. So I would say those are probably the two most frequently asked questions that I kind of receive on a regular basis.
Okay, I think just pretty much just the mental health, just in general, like when it comes to you actually getting into life as far as, you know, working, having kids, relationship, all that. That's where I think the balancing act comes in
Yeah.
comparison to when, rather you're in high school and college, you don't have any kids, you just fending for yourself.
Yeah, and I think to that point, right? I think oftentimes folks think that mental health affects specific demographics, right? Whether it's parents, whether it's students, whether it's people who just lost a loved one, people who are welcoming a new uh, a new child or a new thing into their life. And I think one thing that I think is really important is that mental health doesn't discriminate, right? Anyone can be going through mental health concerns, right? Like, just talking earlier, right? Like, I have a client that's 3 years old and I have a client that's 74 years old. So, similar to what I was just saying, like, mental health doesn't discriminate. It can really impact anyone, regardless of age, creed, um, gender, ethnicity. And so I think that is where the balancing act comes in, right? Because everyone has different stories, everyone has different things that are kind of contributing to their mental well-being. And it's about understanding, maybe some of those early signs, and thinking about how can we kind of make this better and get through this and get to a place where we're feeling good again, and balanced, so to speak.
So I think what's interesting you said when it comes to the 3 year old, or kids, because I think that that's obviously that's something that don't get talked about when it comes to trauma. And obviously everyone comes from different backgrounds, but not only that trauma, how it translates as you get older and you continually have, different types of mental health problems, rather schizophrenia or things like that. So again, not telling me all the detail, but just when it comes to you pretty much doing your session with the 3 year old, how does that what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think not even just with 3-year-olds, but with younger children in general, I think a lot of it is modeling healthy behaviors. And so like through that, like a lot of play therapy, right? And not specific to this client, but um, children sometimes come in with a lot of behavioral challenges, right? And some of these behavioral challenges may be linked to their environment. It may be linked to kind of what it is they're seeing at home, and sometimes even parenting. And I think the important thing is, right, like all of those things can have impact on an individual. And when there's that early intervention, sometimes it can kind of, I don't want to say get nipped in the bud, but you can help develop some healthier habits to deal with some of these things. Because I think, um, yeah, you can just help develop healthier habits, and that can follow someone like down their life through their life continuum. And I think, like, just speaking about younger clients, right? It looks a lot different than working with someone who's 10, 12, or someone who's 25, someone who's 30, and so on and so forth, right? Like the and everyone's situation is unique to them, right? Regardless of if it's a specific like diagnosable mental health concern. Um, Depression in me might look different from depression in someone else, or anxiety in me will look a lot different from someone else's presentation with anxiety, and so on and so forth. That can kind of be um, added to anyone with any mental health condition.
Okay. So this is kind of more so geared towards men because
Hmm.
I would say when it comes to women, as we know, for the most part, they're open,
Hmm.
to mental health. I think for guys, based off of, I would say generation, because I think the younger generation are kind of more open to it. But I know for guys, maybe like in 30s, 40s, maybe late 20s, are kind of, I'm not gonna say, I'll say somewhat against mental health because of the stigma that is being rather it's off for going to the shrink. And I think it's important because we don't call it mental health. We'll call it either stress or whatever. We call it different things, but at the end of the day, it's there. Rather you going through situations with parents, your significant other, family issues, friends, work, just life in general. So how can men identify early signs that their mental health is slipping?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think um, I like the use of signs versus symptoms, right? Because um, you think about symptoms, right? It's very pathologizing, right? It's like um, I have a cold, so I have a cough. But I think in terms of mental health, it's a little bit more nuanced than that, right? It's not always in your face as like I have a cough, am I cold? I have a sore throat. Like, do I have a cold? And so I think to answer the question, like some of the early signs that mental health is slipping, I think a good starting point is for folks to kind of notice what their baseline is, right? Like if they've gone their whole life being or having anger concerns, right? That might be their baseline. But if they've gone their whole life or a majority of their life like as very happy, very outgoing, very personable, and then for a 2-3 week period they're not talking to people, they're not as outgoing, or even things like sleeping more than usual, losing interest in things that like you normally do, maybe being more quickly irritated, feeling drained, um, even though like there aren't many things happening, our life is fine. um, that's just to name a few, right? It really is any change in baseline, but I think so often the message that's pushed out in terms of like, when mental health is slipping is, right, like you're gonna feel sad, like you're just gonna experience sadness. That's how you know. If you're not experiencing sadness, then you're probably fine. It's something that you can get over, or you can get over the hump, so to speak. But I think it's a little bit deeper than that, right? It's, feelings of numbness, could be even zoning out, avoiding people, right? um, and I think sometimes these things happen. Like sometimes I am more irritable than usual. Sometimes, I might lose interest in something I normally did for whatever reason. But I think one big key component is, are these things sticking around for more than a couple of weeks? Am I
Mhm.
experiencing this loss of interest? Am I sleeping more than usual? Is this a persistent thing that has recently changed? And I think that can be a good indicator that maybe there's something going on in terms of mental health. Maybe there isn't, but I think it's worth exploring, right? Because it's not just I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling anxious, right? I think it's what is different from how I've been presenting before.
I think I think the signs are interesting only because, and I'm gonna just say it from like when in law enforcement, for the people who would say they were suicidal or whatever the case is due to certain situations, or pretty much someone actually doing it and following through with the act, it will kind of be like attention seeking. Because at least from working in the field, I realize like, so when they say they're going to do it, more like they're not. 9 times out of 10, like you said, they'll do things that are different. They won't be seeking attention. They'll kind of be to themselves where you got to kind of check on them. And then the next day, you find out, oh well, he hung himself in the in the cell, whatever the case is. So I think the signs are important. I think sometimes it is a cry for help or cry for whatever is going on, but I think it is important to kind of just be aware, pay attention to your loved ones,
Yeah.
because you never know, and you never know what people are going through. Because I know me personally, I'm private, and I don't necessarily disclose a lot of information, and I could be going through it, and someone will never know.
Yeah.
So I do think that's just kind of knowing who you are, and like knowing, okay, I'm not doing this. And I think when men, when it comes to that understanding, okay, I'm doing this, and I know how to channel. I think men, I don't want to say in comparison to women, but I'll just say men are really good at compartmentalizing. So in the compartmentalizing, we're able to, okay, let me go to work, let me move on, put this hat on, I'll put this hat on, and then we'll come back home. We not gonna bring it to the house because wherever it was there. Whereas, when it comes to sometimes women, are they're able to communicate better, or they're able to have somewhat of a what is it called? An outsource, or a community to talk to, whether it's at work, whether it's their girlfriends, whatever the case is. Or as far as we be stoic and he be like, hey, what's going on? Oh, I'm good. That's the common thing, until you kind of realize like, man, I really ain't good. You get what I'm saying? So I think just your understanding yourself, knowing, what makes you tick, can help with you identifying, like you said, when it comes to the signs of your mental health kind of slipping.
Yeah, and then just to jump in there, right? A couple of things. I think, yeah, what you bring up about like suicidality, suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, and even attempts, right? I think 100% of the time it's a call for help, right? And yeah, it's 100% a call for help, right? And most people aren't just saying that they're feeling suicidal because they want someone to be like, oh, like now let me give you attention, right? It's a lot of times a call for help, and whatever that may look like, um, is different. And I think, um, yeah, I think what you said about, I think people in general are really good at compartmentalizing and really wearing those multiple hats, like we all do it, right? In different contexts, whether it's with mental health, whether it's, with other things going on, whether it's from work to friends, right? We all compartmentalize and we all wear these different hats. And I think the important thing with that is, right, like it doesn't go anywhere, right? When you
Mm,
compartmentalize or you put it in a box, where do you put that box? That box stays in your head or it stays in your body, right? And eventually you're going to put so many things into a box and that box is going to overflow. And though all those things are going to start slipping out and impacting you in ways that like you don't want to, or sometimes you don't even know why you're feeling a certain way because you've compartmentalized so much that you're like, why am I feeling like this? And 9 times out of 10, it's probably because some of those things were never addressed, and you can only push things to the side so much with nowhere to go before they start showing up again.
right. Okay. Um, that's good. How can someone tell the difference between like being stressed or being a deeper mental health concern? Like, how do you know the difference as far as okay, this is going on, this is a moment, it's stressing me out compared to this is really stressful,
Yeah,
but it's really a mental health, or it can potentially go into a mental health issue.
it's a really good question, because I think oftentimes stress can be mislabeled, um, because whether it's an avoidance or whether it's just lack of understanding. But I think if we think about stress, right, stress typically comes when there is a stressful situation or there's a lot of pressure to do something. So like if just to put it in context or to give an example, right, like we're thinking about work, I have this really big work deadline, or even school, I have this really big school deadline, um, on, we'll say, Tuesday, August 12th. I haven't done much work for it. I'm really stressed, or I'm really feeling like there's a lot going on. I haven't done anything. This is really stressing me out, right? Stress. And I think if we think about like what, like it developing into a deeper mental health concern, um, thinking about like a deeper mental health concern, like it's something that lingers, right? And something that could potentially be bleeding into a lot of different aspects of life, right? Whether it's sleep, your appetite, relationships, your motivation. Um, like if things that normally when you were stressed that you would do aren't alleviating it, or you reach that deadline and you're still feeling stressed, um, I think that can be a good indicator of it being maybe something more underlying than stress. But I do think I also want to caveat with like stress could be an umbrella term for a lot of different things, right? So like, am I feeling stressed or am I feeling anxious, right? But it might get that stress label, or you might very well be be stressed, right? And so I think again, there's a lot of moving parts in terms of, is it stress, is it something deeper? And I think again, going back to what some of like the earlier conversation about like some of the warning signs, right? If it's something that's lingering even after the stressful situation has been resolved, I think it's worth calling into question, is this something more than stress? Um, and looking back at, what is my baseline, what am I like when I'm not stressed, when I'm not overwhelmed, and and all that fun stuff.
Okay. I think I think just when it comes to just juggling life, I think both men and women we kind of struggle when it comes to trying to juggle life,
Yeah.
family,
Hmm.
and work. And then even if you're in a relationship, then it's like your life, your family, your relationship. If you have kids, then it's kids added to it, and you have to try to be there to keep everyone happy as well as work to be able to provide. So it becomes so many different layers of stress, along with you trying to be there for all of these different entities, family, work, kids. So, it could play a role as well, just to the stress factor. Just like I said, life be life, and but in
Yes,
some
it does.
cases, in some cases, some are more worse than others.
Mhm. Yeah, and yeah, right, and I think you know it's very easy to be an outsider looking in on other people's lives, right? And
Mhm.
you're like, oh, that situation's not that bad. Yeah, it's not that bad for you because you're
Right.
not experiencing it, right? And
Mhm.
I think oftentimes, and I was like this before I got into the career, but a lot of times it's like it's not that big of a deal. Like, why is that something you're like? Why are you letting this consume so much of you, right? And I think one thing that I've learned through the years is that yeah, it might not be big to me, but I'm not experiencing what they're experiencing, and I even in the work, I'll never fully know what someone else is experiencing, even if they tell me what they're experiencing, right? I can, listen to that and have empathy for that, but I'll never fully have a 100% understanding of what it is they're going through, even if it's like, well, that's nothing, right? Or it
Mhm.
feels like nothing from my perspective. But yeah, I think it is life. Life does life, and everyone's life's differently. And
Right.
so I think that's a big thing too in terms of like mental health awareness, and I think male mental health. Um, it's like this is not that bad. Like I know someone who lost all their kids, or things like that, and it's like I'm over here upset about like losing my girlfriend or like breaking up with my
Right.
girlfriend.
Right.
But those things are important to the person, right? It's not like just because someone else went through this doesn't negate what it is you're going through, or it doesn't lessen what it is you're going through or someone else is going through just because the situation's different, right? I think that that's important, especially in thinking about mental health, right? Like someone who lost a loved one could be going through it just as much as someone um, who broke up with their partner, right? And I think oftentimes it's not really talked about, right? Because we as people put things on like these different levels, um, and view things as more important, or sometimes view ourselves as less important, um, in the grand scheme of things.
Two things. I would say, just to allude to what you're saying, as far as not understanding or not knowing, not saying that it was an issue, but I'll just speak on me. Like, when growing up and kind of understanding, okay, I'm not with my dad full time, and then you know coming from a kid's perspective, realizing it, but to now being an adult and kind of somewhat being in the same situation, to where I'm not able to see my kids, and then going through the stressors of wanting to be there for them, trying to do the things, and either it gets blocked, or you know just the fact that you're not able to see your kids on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to kind of like take a step back and like, man, I know if I was going through this, I could only imagine what what he was going through with it. And it's like, we sometimes have to take a step back to kind of understand it, or sometimes be in the shoes that will fully understand and awareness, as far as maybe where a person could come from. And it may not be the same situation, but it's similar, where you could have either empathy, or you can know what it feels like to be in that situation, to where it's just like, excuse my language, but this shit sucks. But it's just like, in life, you take the punches based off your choices or whatever. You got to make the best of it. But the thing is, just understanding, even if you're making the best of it, everyone is not going to be clapping or whatever. You still got to push through, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent.
Yeah, and I think you know, I tell people all the time, like at the end of the day, right? And this is not to, you know, discount any other relationships that people have, but like you always have your best interest, right?
Mhm.
I think, yes, people may have your best interest in relation to them, right? Like how they're viewing what your best interest is. But I think at its core, right, like you have to have your own back, right? And
Mhm.
if you don't, then how can other people even have your back if you don't have your back? And
Mhm.
so I think, you know, and even thinking about like how that relates to mental health, right? Like if you know you're struggling, or if you know you're feeling like you're struggling, it's okay to, you know, have your own back and ask for support, ask for guide, whatever that looks like, right? But not saying, you know, it has to be therapy, even though, you know, it maybe I'm biased, it maybe should be therapy. But I think, you know, asking for help and seeing where that takes you, right? And having your own back. Because if you don't really have your back, it's really hard for other people to have your back, even though they may want to or are showing that they quote unquote have your back. But if you don't have it, what good is that going to do?
Yeah. It's also, you know, even that relates to even when it comes to people treating you a certain way.
Hmm.
They treat what you allow. So if you allow someone to treat you a certain way, it's the same concept of what you're saying. You know, so it's all based off of self.
Hmm.
You know, if you're not self-aware to understand how to be treated, understand that, you know, I'm not feeling too good, and you pretty much just going with the world or social media, wherever the case is, you know, you end up losing yourself.
Yeah, and you know, building into that, right? It so often we grow up everyone, if most people, if not everyone, grows up thinking like we can't be selfish, right? And then different things like that. And I think to an extent, yeah, like it maybe being selfish is not always great, but I think in terms of your own well-being, you do have to be selfish, right?
Hmm.
You have to put yourself first. And if that means, you know, not allowing certain behaviors, then you don't allow those certain behaviors. And if that means, you know, relationships are estranged because of that, then the relationships are estranged because of that. But I think the one area where it's really hard, or where we shouldn't be selfish, is our own well-being and our own energy and our own peace. And that's my take on it, at least.
I think to that, the best analogy I would say, which is common sense if you really think about it, but when it comes to you being on a plane, if you got kids, they tell you when the masks fall or when
Right.
the mask drop, you take care of yourself first, and then you'll be able to take care of the kids. Because the mask drop, you put it on the kids, they can't swim. You know, it's like, what's the point? So I think that analogy,
Or
when it
you
comes to
can't get
making
your
sure,
mask on, right? Like if you put it
yeah,
on your kids and you run out of air, right? What, like who's gonna look out for the kid? Because it's not gonna be
mhm,
Sally sitting behind you who's worried, fearing for her life, right?
right.
So yeah, that's a great way to put it for sure.
Well, kind of going to what you're saying as far as people coming forward. Why do you think men, but I'll say, you know, because I think some females do it, but just in general, feel guilty or have weakness in asking for help, and how do they try to overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? Um, I think I think, you know, one of the big things, and and maybe this is um, just because of my education and stuff, but I think a lot of it comes from the messages that we receive, and I think a lot of the messages which we received are influenced by pop culture, right? Media, even like, you know, how and things are sometimes passed on from generation to generation. I think particularly I can speak maybe more so to Black or African American communities, and probably BIPOC communities as a whole. But I think oftentimes it's viewed as like like the expression of emotions is not always something that is encouraged, for whatever reasons, right? And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think, it's not always encouraged. And so, because of our socialization, right, we're told that, you know, you can handle it, like you're good, like this will pass, you'll get through it. And sure, at some point, right? But why does time have to be how you get through it? Right? It doesn't have to be this time like, oh, like time will heal you. Sure, it might, but if you're not doing anything in between that time, how is it, if you're doing the same things, how is it going to heal you, right?
Mhm.
Or we're told to man up, woman up, or don't burden other people, right? And because of these things, and because of, like, I think media also doesn't help in making it seem like people who see therapists are, I hate using this word, but quote unquote crazy, or have, like, a lot of other things going on. And that's not always the case. I mean, I have clients who show up just because they need a place to vent, right? And they don't have any diagnosable well, for insurance purposes, they do have something diagnosable. But I think, a lot of these things can make it feel difficult to be vulnerable, or make vulnerability feel like a weakness, when I think it's probably the biggest strength any of us can have. Because if you're not vulnerable, then there are a lot of things that can go wrong, or a lot of miscommunication. Um, and I think a good analogy would be like, if you, like going to the gym, right? You're building muscles when you go to the gym. It may not feel good at first, right? You're gonna be sore and all these different things, but the more you go, the stronger you get. You see like some of these visible changes in your body and all that fun stuff. Same thing with like asking for help, whether it be mental health help, or help doing something you don't know how to do, right? It's gonna feel uncomfortable at first, right?
Mhm.
But the more you practice, the better you get at it, right? In any context, the more you practice, the better you're gonna get, or yeah, you're gonna get better. And so I think oftentimes the feeling like asking for help can feel like, well, darn, I failed, right? But really, it's like, again, back to what we were saying, it's, you're prioritizing your own well-being, you're making your health a responsibility. um, the same way, you would go, if you hurt your arm, right, doing something, you would go to urgent care, right? Or if you had a heart condition, you would go to the doctor. You felt tightness in your chest, you would go to the doctor and asking for help, right? Up here is part of your body. That's where your brain is. That's the thing that controls your body. So if this isn't functioning in a way where it's designed to, or if you're dealing with stuff like that, you feel like you can't talk to or ask for help, why not? Because it's not like you would have a broken arm, or a ruptured spleen, or like a stab wound, and be like, you know what, nah, I'll be fine, like time will heal this, right? True, it might, but you also get you get secondary intervention that helps with the process. And so I think there are valid reasons why it may be difficult to ask for help, right? And I'm not discounting that. I think, like everything, starting something, or doing something out of your comfort zone is not going to be fun. But
Mhm.
I I guarantee 9 times out of 10, when you ask for help and you receive the help, right, you feel a lot better than when you didn't ask for help. Um, and it's not something you don't have to figure it out on your own. There are people whose jobs are my job, right? There are people whose jobs are to help people who want it, who are asking for it, just like a doctor's, and different things like that.
I think there's a couple of things. I think with time, I do agree with you because everyone deals with things differently, and also you don't know other barriers or other different things that happen within that situation to make
Mhm.
that person feel that kind of way. Now, I'm not saying hold grudges. Obviously, you hope over time you better deal, but you can't control how someone deals with. certain things because it could be very intimate for whatever delicate reasons,
Hmm.
you know. So I would agree with that when it comes to vulnerability, man. I think sorry. I
No, you're
think when
good.
it comes to vulnerability, I think it could be extremely hard. I'll use myself as a test dummy. Just when it comes to being vulnerable as a man or how I was brought up, from being let down, from different things of asking for help and no one comes through, and then you seeing how different things happen when you are vulnerable or you do say something, rather it's family, rather it's relationship, and they let you down or they hurt you. So now by the time you do either get in a situation that's rather relationship or just family in general, after all this time, you got walls on top of walls on top of walls on top of walls, to where that vulnerability is locked away now because you so protected, because either you've been hurt
Mhm.
or in, right, like I said, rather it's family, hell, even work. Some people, be in their feelings with work and deal with things, and we may look at it like, why are you tripping off that? That's work. You gonna leave. But to them, that, I guess that's their outlet. People deal with things differently. So I just think being vulnerable is an extremely tough, when it comes to just people in general, but I'm just say for myself, because of the different factors,
Yeah.
to be able to let your guard down, and then in hopes that when you let your guard down, that person don't hurt you. And that's extremely tough because no one wants to be hurt. But
Yeah.
like you said, when it comes to working out, then now you said working out as far as building, the vulnerability to be able to be strong. So, and this is where I'm at. So I like when you talk about vulnerability, that was my biggest thing.
Yeah.
But I'm to the point now when it comes to being vulnerable, I'm good either way. Because at the end of the day, it's like I'm saying this, whether you like it or not. I'm not banking on you because I'm good, but I'm just sharing with you. So I think that's a good point when it comes to speaking on vulnerability.
Yeah. And I think, just to build into that, a little bit more, right? Like, you're not going to go see a mechanic for a broken arm, right? You're not going to go to the grocery store um, to get stitches, right? And that's not to say like you shouldn't be, you shouldn't be able to be vulnerable with a multitude of people, right? But sometimes not everyone's ready to receive that vulnerability, right? And just like they're like mechanics are trained to work on your car or work on like their specialty, right?
Mhm.
Doctors have their specialty, right? And there are specialists who work with people who are struggling, whether it's with vulnerability, right? Like I have multiple clients who are in therapy for one reason or another, and they don't want to talk about it. It's fine, right? Like it's not a therapist's job to be like, okay, you're in my session, we have to be vulnerable. It's to create a space to where that feels valuable for the person seeking help or seeking treatment, right? And I think some people sometimes have this mindset that like, okay, well, if I'm in therapy, I have to talk about these things. Sure, it might be helpful to talk about these things, but we don't have to talk about them in our first, second session. Like
Right.
I've seen folks on my caseload for like a year, and I'm finding out new things about them each week that like I'm like, oh, I could have known this, when we first met. Like this would have been maybe helpful in understanding these different aspects, but they weren't ready to share it, right? And so, um, but creating it's our job as clinicians, right, to create a space where you know that vulnerability can be fostered, and it doesn't have to be right away because, like you said, it is a muscle that you have to build and train and continue training.
So what would you say are some healthy pretty much outlets, for stress, besides, working, going to the gym?
Yeah, I think I don't know if working is an outlet for stress. It might be a contributor to some stress, but that's my personal opinion. I do think physical activity is a great stress reliever, right? It's probably a common one that people think about, whether it's running, going to the gym, um, any exercise related thing. And I think one thing I try to like shy away from are the use of things like healthy, negative, bad, right? Because who am I to tell someone what's healthy, right? I think
Mhm.
if it's if it's productive, right, it might not be great. Like I know some people's outlets for stress relief is drinking, smoking,
Mhm.
illicit substance use, right? I'm not going to say that those are like, no, that's not a good healthing strategy, right? Because if it helps alleviate something, then it does. But I think the important thing is knowing what are some of the long term effects of some of these habits that I'm doing. So physical activity, right? The long term effects, maybe you get in shape, and so thinking about more maybe productive healthy outlets or coping strategies, right? Like um, journaling, right? Jotting down your thoughts. Cooking could be a stress relief. Going hiking, um, doing things without music, right? I think sometimes music can get us, even more hyped or even more like amped, right? And sometimes it's good to just zen out, right? Joining a group, whether it's a men's group or a group that, it's something you're passionate about, like drawing, pottery, it can be a lot. Um, Even playing music, right? Like playing music that gets you in a relaxing mood. Um, the list can go on, like volunteering, photography. And so I think the big thing is in terms of healthy outlets, right, is finding something that allows you to process your emotions, um, and not just distract from them, right? Because I think, like we talked about earlier, like compartmentalizing those things, right? Like, okay, I'm going to go to the gym because I'm feeling anger and I want to distract myself from feeling anger, right? Like, cool. But where does that anger go? What is that thing you were angry
Mhm.
about? What happens when it happens again, right? You're going to go to the gym, you're going to do it, and then it's going to happen again, right? Versus like, processing your emotions. I'm feeling this, I'm going to intentionally go do this to sit with my emotions, to talk about them, to think about them. That's where the healthiness comes in, right? Because you can't just shove that emotion away. And one thing I tell people all the time, um, you we're as human beings, we cannot control our emotions. It's impossible, right? Something can happen and it, like at the drop of a dime, you can be emotional about it, whether it's angry, sad, tearful, frustrated. You can't control your emotions. What you can do is you can control how you respond to your emotions, right? And
Mhm.
do with those emotions, right? So I'm angry we because we started a minute late, right? Like, oh, like I'm so angry. Um, I can't control that, right? That's just something that came into my being. I'm angry, right? What I
Mhm.
can control is what I do with that, right? If I was angry and I was like, I'm not doing this, and not that we started a minute late, but I'm angry and I'm not
Mhm.
doing this, or like I'm gonna get on here while we're on live and I'm just gonna air this out, right? Could have done that, or could do that, right? If I was angry, I have a choice over that, or I could continue the podcast, and it didn't really, it didn't affect me, even though I was angry about it, right?
Mhm.
Sure, but my response to that determines everything beyond that. Um, if I get on here and I'm cussing, I'm gonna have different. There's gonna be different repercussions to that, versus like, okay, sure, we're a minute late. I can do the like. I'm not gonna do it, or I could have been like, I'm not doing this today.
Right, 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 right.
So like we have choices in how we respond. sometimes we can't control our emotions. We can regulate them, but we can't control them.
Hmm. Okay. So when it comes to what you're saying, just with emotions in general and just mental health in general, how do you think social media is playing a role in everyone's mental health for people who are really active in social media?
Yeah, I mean, again, another $1 million question. I think, and this comes up a lot, right? Like, I think social media isn't going anywhere, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
really hard to, even with intentional social media breaks, right? Like, someone's gonna talk about something social media related or social relevant to social media. Like, it's part of the culture, it's pop culture. I think social media can have benefits. You can continue fostering connections, staying in touch, seeing what folks are doing, getting more information. I know there are a lot of like social media mental health pages and different things like that, or like events that post events and different things like that. So, it creates a space to build community and foster connections, right? And on the other hand, just with anything, there could be positives and there also could be negatives, because
Mm-hmm.
that's the balance, right? It can't only be positive. There's going to be some negatives for someone or some group. And so I think, the negatives are, it can be easy to get caught up in social media and like perceptions within social media and all that, all those different things that, you know, some of us maybe have fallen victim to or haven't. But I think, you know, I think social media can alleviate some mental health things, but it can also contribute to them, right? Like there's no, some people, they might need it to, like, if they're feeling very isolated and or have extreme anxiety, and social media is that one place where, like, okay, like I don't have to be in person, I can interact with my friends virtually, like in a virtual format or
Mm-hmm.
a format that's not in person. Or I think what we hear about often is, right, like, oh, like I see this influencer, right, doing this big thing. Oh, they just took a trip to Indonesia or Bali or Bora Bora. Oh wow, I wish I could afford to go to Bora Bora. Like, what am I not doing with my life? Or this person's so pretty, or this person's handsome, right? And like, I want to be like that. Like, I want to get fit like that, and all that stuff. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, right, cool, but you're also only getting what they're showing you, right? Maybe that lifestyle
Exactly.
is not
Exactly.
great. Maybe it is great, right? But and I think we all kind of do this, right? Like, if you're posting on social media, it's not the full story, right?
Yeah, it's highlights and it's all. I don't mean to cut you off, but it's all the good parts, and people look at it and they're like, "Oh yeah, I want to do that," but it's just like I know they do it a lot with relationships. Oh, why don't we go to this place? Look at this couple doing this, but it's just like you're showing they're showing pretty much the image that they want you to see.
Yeah,
Like you seeing this, they taking a nice picture, but you don't know. Probably 5 minutes before they took that picture, they was sitting there arguing. So it's
yeah,
all good, and then that's what I think the perception, at least when it comes to the bad part, because I agree with you, there are good parts, but when it comes to perception, people look at a lifestyle. Okay, this is how it's supposed to be, but you're not seeing the arguments. No one, every relationship is gonna have turmoil because it's you finding out someone, you learn someone, you don't like what someone, whatever the case is, there's gonna be turmoil, friction, and how you get through it is what makes a relationship. But I think sometimes it creates a false narrative that,
for
oh, this
sure.
has to be like that. But on, like you said, on the flip side, when it comes to the good things, there are good things like motivational speakers, things that are, telling you, yes, you need to work on your body, or you need to work on yourself first, and allow everything else to fall in place. So it's good and bad, but it just sucks because a lot of things that's pushed is bad,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah.
So
No, sorry, I didn't mean to
no,
pause
no,
you,
go
but
ahead.
think I think also too, sometimes it can be very easy to you know use social media as a scapegoat, right? Like, oh, like
Mhm.
I'm feeling bad because of these things I saw on social media. And 9 times out of 10, that those feelings, they didn't come from social media. Those feelings were there. They might have been shoved down. They might have been put
Mhm.
in that box. And
Mhm.
social media maybe is the avenue that brought them out, right? But I think,
Mhm.
social media sometimes can get this bad rap of like, oh, like this thing is, it's a bunch of people being fake on social media. And I don't know if I agree with that, right? Because
Mhm.
you can post something and that be true in the moment, right? To your point, we could have an argument 5 minutes ago and
Mhm.
then resolve our argument and we post each other, right? And so I think, yeah, I think a lot like it's also a reality, right?
Yeah,
It's
perception.
yeah, it's a snapshot of a reality, right? It's not
Mhm.
because life happens in milliseconds or
Mhm.
whatever the smallest unit is of time, and things can change that quickly. But I mean, and that's not to say like there are a lot of negatives to social media as well, um, but I do think it sometimes gets this rap of like, well, this is why this is why you're like that because you're on social media. And it's like,
Yeah,
maybe
no, I agree with you on that because, that, like you said, it could be other underlying issues, not
that is
just social media.
out.
Social media probably was what got it out, but there
Mhm.
was probably issues before social media. Like you said, they kind of use it as a scapegoat because it's an easy excuse to use.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it before too. Social media, that darn social media. Otherwise, I'd be fine. But it's like, sure, like it's the easy thing to blame. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I think also having some of that awareness of like, sure, but and what was happening before this that made me feel triggered by something on social media.
Okay, well, before we wrap this up, just for the people listening, when it comes to mental health, what would you say are some small daily habits that can make the biggest difference,
Yes.
for your mental health well being?
There's so much. Um, I think one thing, checking in with yourself, right? How am I doing right now? And when people ask us, "Hey, are you doing okay?" and we're like, "Sure, I'm fine." That may be our response to them, but
Mhm.
ask yourself that in the morning. How am I?
Mhm.
How are you? To yourself. And answer that truthfully. And that way going into the day, I'm feeling really irritated today. Cool. You know that. So now it's not like, okay, well, I feel off, but I'm fine. But you're not. You're irritated the whole day.
Right.
And when you know that information, you can move accordingly, or you can, think about it and get it out. And I think um, the cliche thing, movement, mindfulness, I think eh, adding to the social media context, right? If social media is a trigger for you, like maybe no phone for the first 20 minutes after waking and getting your stuff done. But like I think really anything that pours into your metaphorical glass, so to speak, could make even the slightest differences in like mental health well-being. And I think sleep as well. um, I know, sometimes we want to stay up on TikTok, on Instagram till 2 3 in the morning. Cool, but make sure you're getting your sleep, and prioritizing some good sleep, because that also makes a difference. You got to have your
So how
back.
does how does that play into your mental health, and why is it so overlooked?
Yeah, I mean, the $1 million question. Um, Sleep is really important in terms of your mental health, but I think sleep allows you to recharge, allows your body to recharge, allows your mind to rest. That's probably the only time where, you know, your mind never is really resting because it's keeping you alive. But that's the time where you're where it gonna say shut off, but it doesn't. But like where your brain is functioning at a lesser intensity than when you're awake, right?
Mhm.
And so sometimes sleep can mess with your focus, your mood regulation. Um, it can make you more irritable. Um, and I think it's overlooked, right? Because we as a society focus on um, like what can we see, like what is important right now, and not really looking at some of the steps we can take to help mitigate some of these things. So yeah, sleep is important. Right, thinking about like for folks who travel a lot or folks who've experienced jet lag, can't get much done when you have jet lag, when your body's in a different time zone, or your mind's in a different time zone and your body's in it, your mind and body are in two different time zones, right? And it's unproductive. It affects a multitude of different things. And so say all that to say sleep is important and try to get some sleep. Um, but also don't work too hard or stress yourself out because you're not getting enough sleep. Just make sure you're sleeping in some ways, whatever that means for you, feeling well rested.
Any last words?
I was gonna say ask for help if you need it. You don't have to be alone. You're not alone. There are people who want to help, people who get paid to help. Um, so just like you'd go to a specialist for anything, right? Whether it's your car, something going on with your body, a dentist, a florist to get flowers, right? There are people who you can go to who have the credentials to help you. And if they can't help you, they will send you to someone else who can. Um, so yeah, prioritize your own well-being, and pour into your glass.
And if someone wanted to find you to probably take you on as a therapist or have questions, if you feel comfortable, where can they be able to reach you?
Hmm. On LinkedIn, um, Anthony Easter. I would say Instagram, but my Instagram is personal. So I try to keep those two worlds separate as best as I can, right?
Mhm.
But if LinkedIn isn't an option, yeah, you can find me on Instagram. Um, it's OHTHATS and then Easter. And yeah, if that's the only way, then sure we can connect there, but preferably on LinkedIn, just Anthony Easter.
All right. This has been Anthony Easter. This has been a great episode, my little brother. Thank you for you guys tuning in. Like, comment, and also subscribe. But also, tell me what you think about this episode in the chat. Thank you guys. You
Yes,
guys
thank
have
you.
a blessed day.
Bye everyone.